Welcome back to It's Not a Sport.
Alright, welcome back. There's a lot of interesting things going on this week. First off, Gamescom 2018 is happening right now in Germany. There's been a lot of kind of gameplay released from Assassin's Creed to Devil May Cry 5. We'll cover this all next week on next week's podcast episode, just because it's not over yet and there's still a lot to be announced. In terms of esports, Overwatch is actually having their World Cup right now in Korea. The problem is that for us over here in the US, it plays in the middle of the night. I know playoffs will happen in November at BlizzCon. And in League of Legends, we're in playoffs currently, and Worlds is right around the corner, which they haven't promoted at all. Same with the Overwatch Cup. I find that really odd. Team Liquid and Cloud9 are in semifinals, with Team Liquid being our first place seed and Cloud9 being our second. Then in quarterfinals is Echo Fox versus TSM and 100 Thieves versus FlyQuest. And we also have some tiebreakers which happened, and that is happened Monday. So TSM lost the first versus Echo Fox. Then 100 Thieves won against FlyQuest. Then TSM won against FlyQuest. Then 100 Thieves won against Echo Fox. So it looks like everyone just went 1-1 except FlyQuest. So it should be interesting to see what happens at playoffs. Next, in EU, Splice and FC, G2 and Misfits are in quarterfinals, and Team Vitality and Fnatic are in semifinals, with Fnatic being their first place seed and Vitality being their second place seed. We have a great show for you guys today. We talk about animation and 3D art. It's a lot of interesting information because it's a huge process and it's a really big part of designing any movie, any game, and really any story. I hope you enjoy it. Let's move on. So if you watched our art episode, you learned that there was a lot of different aspects that play into design making a video game when it comes to art, and going into concept art to art of making worlds to designing characters to storyboards. But what I didn't really mention is 3D art. Now, it's a very complicated process. It's not as simple as drawing a picture, because you're not working on a 2D plane and making it look like 3D. You're actually working on a 3D plane. So this is actually how a lot of characters models are designed. How maybe objects, like let's say a pot or a pan, are designed. They're designed 3D-ish because when you play in a video game, unless you're playing a 2D side-scroller, you're playing in a 3D space. So, just like before, ArtStation is a great place to go look at some of these 3D arts. And if you want to try it yourself, there's actually a free program that is very fun, very wacky to use, that I've used before in the past, called Sculptress. Basically what it is they give you a sphere, and there's a ton of different settings, and you basically can move the spear around. You can transform the spear to whatever shape, whatever form, whatever sort of creature being you want it to be. And with that, if you have access to a 3D printer, which if you live in Chicago and I believe are 18 or under 18 in your teen years at U Media, which is usually at any public library. You can ask to go use their 3D printer, and they'll let you, and you can design, go into Sculptress, and you can design, whatever shape you want, and then port it to a 3D printer, and it'll print it for you. I know some colleges are now using 3D printers, so if you're in college, maybe if you look around your campus, you can definitely find one. I know there's 3D printing labs, so if you Google in your area and see if you can find a 3D printing lab, you can go there and try a 3D print. But 3D art it's very important, and it's a huge aspect of designing a video game that we don't really think about. Same with art, because once you're done with the 2D art aspect of, let's say, the world, then someone has to go into the program and actually design what the background, the mountains that you see in Skyrim, for instance, or just the terrain in Fortnite, or the trees in Fortnite, or the buildings in Fortnite, just anything 3D, they have to design that. And then what they have to do is they have to texture it. So they have to make it, look like a tree. They have to make it look like a building, like brick. I think the best example of this actually is Minecraft. Minecraft is a 3D game, but it's entirely made out of blocks, right? Each block is just a block. That's all it is. But how does, everything work? Well, texture packs, right? So people had to install texture packs. People made their own texture packs. In Minecraft, everything's just a block. Those blocks have certain aspects tied to them. Like, this block is a piece of wood. This block is dirt. This block is stone. And the texture pack, all it does is just add a stone-looking texture to the block titled as stone. That's all Minecraft is at the end of the day. Is it more complicated than that? Yes, but it is just that at the end of the day. It's the same with any game. If you play Skyrim and you mod Skyrim, each character has the same model, which means for all female characters, they have the same body type. For all male characters, they have the same body type. The only thing different is the clothes. The clothes are basically the model, is the 3D model for the women. The only difference is with all Bethesda games, I actually think, default, they all have the same body type. The only difference is the face. The face is the only thing that's actually, worked on, but everything else is just exactly the same. With mods, there's certain mods that, change that, but with Bethesda games, it's just that. And then it comes to clothes, and the clothes have to be textured. And if you mod stuff, and if you change the clothes may not work anymore. They may not be seeable. They may not be fit properly on the character model. The textures may glitch out and just go everywhere. You have to experience these glitches at least once, especially in Bethesda games, because those games are so glitchy. But that's constant. That's a good example of 3D modeling. The other example is CGI. CGI, if you watch, is used in a lot of our movies nowadays. It's basically become a standard of movies. Like, you can't get around it. And all that is just originally just 3D modeling in a computer and texturing, and bada beep boop pow, there you go. Ready Player One, perfect example. The final scene with that huge terrain, that's nothing but CGI. It's computer generated images. Nothing but CGI. And this also kind of moves into the next part, which is animation. Animation plays a huge part in video games. and CGI. There's different types of animation. There's animation from Pixar and Disney and how they've done their animation, where you hand draw animation, there's stop go animation, and that plays differently. So the movie type of animation. Even though I'm pretty sure they used to do it hand drawn. I know Disney used to do it hand drawn way back in the day. Now, again, it's CGI. It's all on the computer. But they still have to design that using art. Someone had to draw Mr. Incredible, had to design what he was going to look like, and then they had to animate it. It's all done on a computer, and there's tons of programs that you can do it. You can even do it in Photoshop now, if you have access to that. In video game animation, it's more like when you kill somebody, like let's say Street Fighter is a perfect example of this. When you do a light punch, that's an animation. When you do a Hadouken, and you have to go into the Hadouken of like the pose, that's the animation. And then Street Fighter, if you get really, really professionally into it, has a lot of frame animations to it, which means like there's certain frames, like that animation of the Hadouken is like 2 frames, and that's 1, 2, basically 2 seconds. So then people have to learn that, and they have to learn the frame data of the animation in order to improve at the game. Same with God of War, him throwing the axe, that's an animation. There's of course walking animations, because if we didn't have walking animations, then they would just be sliding around. This is classic in like Valve games, really. If you go play Gmod, you can see where like sometimes the character model just does not work well, and they just slide around. So animation is a huge key, and if you want to get animation, again, there's a lot of routes you can take. If you go in the video game animation, you can go into like cutscene animation. Persona 5 had this kind of really cool animation cutscenes. What they did, their opening song and scene in the game is fantastic. But that was all animation, so people have to work on that. You can go into movie animation, you can go into CGI animation. Someone had to animate, the Black Panther's suit. Well, actually, now that I think about it, that's a different type of animation, where basically it kind of works the same way that VR works, where you're in a room and they have these cameras, and the cameras all focus on a certain spot, and this is motion capture animation. So you're in a suit, so the person's in a suit, and he has all these balls on the suit at specific points in the body, preferably joints, I believe. And every time he moves, the cameras pick up his movement as somewhat of a skeleton, and then they put it into the computer. And that's called motion capture. That's how like a lot of video game animations are actually made. That's how they do movies most of the day. Like Spider-Man, or I think the example that comes to mind is the old Green Lantern film. He wasn't wearing like a actual Green Lantern costume. He was wearing like a suit with like balls on it, or just a green suit, and that's how he moved around. And that's how they moved around and captured his animation. He's still, reciting his lines, he's still acting, but he's just in a suit. And then once they go onto the computer, they animate that suit onto him. And that's how that's how movies are made. Video games is a little bit different. They put balls all over the face to you know, because they have to distort you opening your mouth and moving your joints and etc. etc. There's a lot of videos out there of this. I'm pretty sure there's videos of uh, the new God of War and a voice actor for Kratos in one of these suits acting out and voicing his lines as Kratos, and then they show you it side by side in the game and what it looks like. So that's just one side of animation, uh, and that side's more used for movies and video games. Then there's, you know, the Pixar animation and the anime animation. Uh, Most people are probably, these are the two most familiar, because I think anime is super popular and everyone knows Pixar. Pixar is super popular. Both are hand drawn. It's the same process where you have to create a storyboard and then you hand draw it, and maybe draw a scene, or then you go into the computer and then you have to animate it. This is more 2D animation, where the animation's not really about just movement. Where in video games, the animation's more just about movement, performing actions, in that sort of animation, just like 3D modeling. It's like T-pose. If you see a Batman, the interesting thing about the Arkham games is that if you wiggle the joystick back and forth really fast, side to side, Batman doesn't have a side-to-side animation, so he'll just T-pose. It's not hard to find. It's pretty easy to do. But that's another prime example of kind of both of the worlds combining. But Pixar animation it's more of, it's not really 3D-ish. It's more of 2D animation. The entire thing is animation. And it's more about telling the story, more about the movements. Pixar now has gotten really good. We're making animation look good, because I feel like that's what movie animation is more about. It's not about performing the actions like in video games, like I said. It's more about how it looks and how it feels. Where video game texturing and rendering and like the snow and all that, that's more about how real the game looks. And then you add on the animation, and then that's kind of like the movement aspect, how real the movement is. I don't feel like that's super hard. But like, for instance, video games will always struggle with like curly hair, because it's really difficult to like, for like a black woman's hair, or just anyone who has like really curly hair, it's really hard to kind of texture that. So they have to always go to like straight hair or short hair. So that's why you never really see curly hair. Where in animation, it's not really about that. It's more about what everything else looks like. So again, there's certain styles of animation, but it's more about, you know, not really about the movement and how, like, okay, we can't get curly hair to move like that, or you can't get the curls to look like that, but it's more about like, this is how the world looks. So I think the most, like, the primary example of this, if you go look at old Pixar films, they're really kind of, they've aged well, yes, but they're really kind of old, like out of date-ish. They're really weird, like How to Train Your Dragon, or like Shrek. They're just really weirdly kind of, they just look weird. Like, they just look so 2000-ish. And then now you look at the two new Pixar films that just came out, which is like Incredibles 2 and the one about the boy and the Day of the Dead, Coco. That's what it's called. And they're just visually beautiful. They visually are just fantastic movies. And when I was watching Incredibles 2, that's what really captured me, is how far Pixar has come from animation and how far they've grown. Then you have CGI animation, and CGI animation is generally disgusting. Ready Player One, I think, could be, honestly, uh, is an animated movie. But it's all done in that CGI space where they try to make things look real, but CGI is not, it's not made. CGI is not really made for an entire movie. People use it nowadays because it's so much cheaper. But what it really is it's an alternative to sets. So, old movies, you used to actually have to go to a location. You used to actually, like, record in a club, you have to make that club, you have to record in a grocery store, whatever the location was, you actually had to go there, and you actually had to record in that space. Then came CGI, and what CGI does is, instead of traveling to Italy or France to record in the Louvre, you just walk behind a green screen, and boom, you're in the Louvre. It saves so much money. Or if you want to destroy a city, you don't have to make a set of that fake destroyed city. Uh, Boom, you just CGI it. The perfect example of these two different types of kind of animation is the old Star Wars. Original Star Wars, all of those, they were toys. The Millennium Falcon was toys. Death Stars, they were toys. And they were just little toys that they just flew around. Now, you go watch the new modern Star Wars, it's all CGI. And that's that type of animation. The last type of animation I would say is, I think anime animation. It's a very common style because, I think anime is very popular. I'm a huge fan of anime. I've been watching it, and it's definitely something that's developed my skills, and I've loved some of the stories that they've told. Most animations now, for anime at least, with the studios, they all do it the same. Uh, it's very cheaply done. I think now, if we had to talk about anime's animation, uh, they're not very. Nothing's improved. In fact, I think it's downgraded over the course of the years, where we were kind of in the golden prime of animation, which 2009-ish, 2012-ish, where if you go watching old Cowboy Bebop, uh, Evangelion, uh, Code Geass, those type of animations, they're all different, they're all unique, and they're all, you know, they looked good. Nowadays, not so much. Nowadays, everything kind of looks the same. It's kind of blocky. Uh, you have the good kind of realistic style of animation, and then you kind of have the triangle face kind of animation. Uh, and it's not fantastic. However, I will not leave you there. Violet Evergarden. These are my two honorable mentions. Actually, we'll make it three. Violet Evergarden is an animation series on Netflix. It really shows you what a studio can do if they have the money, aka Netflix. It is beautifully animated. It is fantastic to just look at. It's fantastic. Yeah, it's really beautiful animation. How they get the textures of the eyes and just how they animate everything in that is fantastic. If you have a Netflix subscription, I highly recommend you try and watch the first episode. It is fantastic. For video game honorable mentions, the Cuphead. Cuphead is a classic old Disney type of style of animation. All those are hand drawings. They hand draw all of Cuphead's animations. And if you've ever seen or played that game, you just know how crazy and wacky that game is. And they have to draw all of it. So that's why Cuphead, takes so long to, to make, and that's why this DLC is also took so hard to make, because Cuphead is also visually beautiful. For movies, um, I have to say there are some good animated movies like Your Name is a visually beautiful, good animated movie that comes to mind. But I just think Pixar just does it the best. When it comes to just animated movies, they just dominate it. Maybe Frozen, but it's been a while since I've seen Frozen. But the new Incredibles, if you just look at it from an art standpoint and how everything looks, it is beautifully uh, animated. And they've always been really good at this, and they've just improved. My name is Salty Waffles, also known as Taban Lewis. Thanks for listening.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of It's Not a Sport. Follow us on Twitter, subscribe to our YouTube, our Instagram, etc., all that social media. And tune in next week for another great episode of It's Not a Sport. Thanks for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day.